So I think that is all in terms of sort of housekeeping and structure. So I'm going to hand over to Joe first. Joe, thank you so much for being with us today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Patty. I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay. Brilliant. And if someone could just let me know that you can see the presentation, it should be on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much to everyone for joining us today and taking the time out of your day to be here. As Patty said, my name's Joe. I'm here from Housing Justice and I help to coordinate the Refugee Lodgings project. And I'm joined by my colleague Ella, who is also from Housing Justice, and she helps to coordinate the hosting project. And really, the theme of today in today's session is basically we're going to be looking at how you can open your home with the support of Housing Justice, or how you can encourage someone else to open their home with our supports, and really play a really kind of key and impactful role in helping someone in need and really being a part of the solution. So in terms of the agenda, obviously Patty's covered the sort of main things. Just to sort of reiterate, we will begin with just a little overview of Housing Justice and what we do, our mission and vision. We'll then sort of move on to looking at Refugee Week and the theme of Refugee Week being our home. I will then give an overview of the new refugee lodgings projects before kind of giving an overview of the hosting projects. And then we'll look at some of the really kind of key differences between lodgings and hosting. Before having a little look at what the sort of benefits of opening your home are. Now, that's for yourself as a landlord or a host, but also for the person who is receiving that support, so for a guest or a lodger as well. I'll then hand over to Ella, who's going to talk about our onboarding and matching processes and a bit about the support that we provide during a placement as it goes on. And then we'll be hearing from Aidan. So Aidan is one of our most experienced hosts. He's been hosting with us for several years now, and he's going to talk a little bit about his experience of hosting. After that, we'll have around 20 minutes, an opportunity for Q&A. So as Patty said, as we're going, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or just make a note of them and you'll have an opportunity to ask them then. And then finally, we'll talk about the next steps, so how to register interest and share information about both projects within your own networks and communities. So Housing Justice, a little bit about us. We are a charity that is operational both in England, but also in Wales. We have a team in Wales. And we have several different projects, very much ranging from help with kind of orchestrating and organizing the winter night shelter network within England, to sort of looking at more kind of volunteer management sort of side of things with projects like Citadel, to projects like Faith and Affordable Housing that look to procure unused church property and kind of convert it into affordable housing. So lots of different projects, including our own ones with the Refugee Lodgings project and the hosting project, but all with a common goal of alleviating homelessness in all its forms. And that really links to our mission, in that our mission is to mobilize Christian action on homelessness and housing need through love, justice, advocacy, and nurture. And our vision is of a society where everyone has access to a home that truly meets their needs. So this means a secure and genuinely affordable home in a neighborhood where an individual can access work and services that enable them to flourish. Now, I think what's particularly special about both the Refugee Lodgings project and the hosting project that we'll be speaking about today is that they really sort of embody that vision. At the core of both projects is being able to provide a safe, stable, and comfortable home for someone, and giving a person that sort of opportunity and environment within they can kind of think about the next steps for themselves and hopefully flourish. So Refugee Week and its theme being our home. So this week is Refugee Week and the theme is our home. Now, I must say, when I kind of first heard that the theme was our home, my initial kind of thinking was, oh, that's great. It's, our home's got real relevance to our hosting project and refugee lodgings project. But I did immediately think of the home as a house, somewhere with four walls. And actually, when you sort of look into it and when you really kind of think about what our home is and what it means, it's not really so simple, in the fact that home can also be a place of refuge. It can be a feeling, a state of mind. There might be times where you're in a place that's completely separate from your actual home, but there's something, whether it's a smell, a taste, a sound, something that sort of triggers that feeling of home. And it comes in many different kind of forms, many different shapes and sizes. So from the clothes that we wear to the words that we grew up with, our accents, it's in our food, in our music, and our arts, and in our cultures and landscapes as well. So it's not always just as simple as kind of the house where you live. It's far-reaching, the idea of home, and also the idea that even if you aren't in your original home, you can still find home somewhere else and still find those things that remind you of your home. Having said that, I think it is really important just to remember and be mindful of the importance of having a safe, warm, and comfortable home, and having a safe, warm, and comfortable house, because that can really be the foundation upon which someone can start to build a life in the UK. And that's exactly what both the Refugee Lodgings Project and the Hosting Project aims to provide. So how can you open your home with housing justice to someone in need? Well, as I've sort of alluded to already, there's two options, really. We have two different projects, the Refugee Lodgings Project and the Hosting Project, which I will explain now. So looking at the Refugee Lodgings Project, how I'll do this is I will firstly explain the context within which the Refugee Lodgings Project came about, and then give you some details about how the project works. So around sort of August 2023, so last summer, we saw a government change in procedure, where the amount of time that people were having from receiving a sort of positive decision on their asylum claim, so being told that they could stay in the country for a certain amount of time, we were seeing that the amount of time that they were then being given to find a housing solution and move on from their Home Office asylum accommodation was much shorter than usual. So ordinarily, it should be that someone's given 28 days to find a housing option. And that includes, 28 days to open a bank account, to start claiming benefits, start looking for work, and to find a place. So already 28 days is a really tight time frame. But what we were seeing through that kind of change in procedure was that time frame was being shortened to as little as 7 days sometimes. So that was only a temporary thing. It has now reverted back to the 28 days, but the consequences are very clear in terms of the statistics on the rise of homelessness of people coming out of asylum accommodation. As you can see from the slide, there was a reported 234% rise from September 2023 to January 2024 of people rough sleeping who had recently left Home Office asylum accommodation, and that was just in London alone, 311 people. So really, the Refugee Lodging Project was born out of that need for there to be a sort of interim solution and a stepping stone for people coming out of asylum accommodation who just needed that extra bit of space and time to then find themselves a longer term option. And we were approached by the GLA, the Greater London Authority, to sort of orchestrate this new project. As a result of our experience and the success of our hosting scheme, and as a result of the fact that we've kind of got a very good sort of working relationship with the GLA. And so we formed this partnership whereby we work with local authorities, a host of local authorities in the northeast and southeast of London. And how it works is we receive all of our referrals from those local authority outreach teams or their homelessness prevention teams. And what the project does is we will match someone who is either at risk of rough sleeping or directly experiencing rough sleeping, and we match them with what's called a resident landlord. Now, I sometimes feel like that sounds a bit fancy. Essentially, it's just somebody with a spare room. That doesn't have to be a homeowner. That can be someone renting. That could also be someone renting social housing. And once we've matched those two people, we sort of create and facilitate and support a 6-month placement where there is kind of very much active ongoing support throughout. It's not the case that we just kind of set it up and say, okay, we'll leave you to it until month 6. It's a lot of ongoing support that Ella will describe later on in this presentation. So looking at hosting then. So hosting is obviously different from the Refugee Lodgings project in that it responds to the need of those who are seeking asylum in the UK and those who have other immigration cases that fall outside of the asylum system, including survivors of modern day slavery. So whereas the Refugee Lodgings project is for people who have received that kind of positive decision on their asylum claim and now have refugee status, hosting is for those who are kind of actively engaged in the process of kind of seeking refugee status and seeking asylum in the UK. Now, when we're thinking about the need for hosting and why we need it, I think it's really important to kind of be mindful of the timeframes that are often involved with asylum applications. So in 2022, asylum applications took an average of 21 months to receive an initial decision in the UK. And that's just to receive an initial decision. If someone then receives a negative initial decision on their asylum claim, they are then entitled to, they can appeal that and they can engage in something called a fresh claim. But that in itself is a very extensive process where they have to find legal representation, new evidence, and then actually submit that fresh claim. And really, throughout this whole time, these people are very much in a state of limbo. And we say that because for the majority of people, they are often unable to work and as a result, properly integrate into society. And so what hosting aims to do is alleviate the isolation by connecting people together, by bringing someone into a new community, into a new household, with the hopes that it can sort of help them integrate into society. So obviously we'll come on to the key differences in a moment, but probably one of the most kind of key and obvious differences between the two projects is that the Refugee Lodgings project has been operational since March. So it's in its very much early days. We have supported 4 people who are either at direct risk of homelessness or experiencing homelessness. We've supported them into kind of safe, welcoming households, which is a fantastic start. Whereas hosting has been, the project has been ongoing since 2015 and has had some absolutely fantastic results. I mean, that are probably best demonstrated by the fact that we provided over 50,000 safe nights with over 23 different nationalities of people hosted. So there's a real variety there with the hosting project. And I think if you look to the sort of lower half of the infographic, that variety is also sort of exemplified by the fact that when you look at the profiles of our guests on the left-hand side, you can see that there's 34 people that were actively seeking asylum, that were asylum seekers, but also 28 people, so almost a similar amount, that were kind of had different types of immigration status. So that's including, you know, the ones that I mentioned before in terms of kind of human rights cases, victims of modern slavery, these sort of 10-year or 20-year routes to indefinitely to remain. So real variety there. I think what's also important to note and what's very interesting about this infographic is in terms of the gender profiles of our guests. So with 40 guests being female and 25 guests are male. So actually, you know, we support almost double the amount of male guests and yeah, with 40 being female. So real variety in terms of what we're doing with the hosting project. And we've seen some really great outcomes in terms of the support that we've been able to provide and the kind of positive kind of consequences of that. For example, we've helped 8 guests so far open bank accounts on the hosting project. We have set up a kind of immigration advice service, of which we got 20 referrals and we're able to take on 15 of those. So a really good uptake and a really important service because as you can see, for a lot of people, having that immigration advice is really important to their kind of current situation and progressing from that. And we've also seen one of our guests be accepted into 4 different universities. You know, absolutely fantastic outcomes, basically. And whilst it's early days with the lodgings project, it's similar that we've seen kind of two of our lodgers get into employment courses. So yeah, really nice outcomes. And it's, one of the main things is just seeing that confidence and security that having kind of a stable home can provide someone with. I think it's, vitally important. So looking at the main differences then. So our hosts are volunteers. That means there's absolutely no money exchanged in response for the service that they kind of provide and the home that they kind of open up to a guest. Whereas our resident landlords do receive rent. So the rent is always agreed at the local housing allowance rate for a particular area, which means that it can always be covered by a lodger's universal credit, so by the housing benefits. So there is that financial incentive with the refugee lodgings project. Then if we kind of look at the profile of the people that each project supports, we can see that with hosting, the guests are, as I said before, asylum seekers and other types of migrants. They literally often legally cannot work or access benefits due to their immigration status, and are often at risk of homelessness just due to the sheer lack of housing options available to them. Whereas with refugee lodgers, we are supporting people who are newly granted refugees, so who have had that positive decision, have had that notification from the Home Office that they are able to stay in the country. That's what we mean by kind of newly granted refugees. We're working with people who are legally able to look for work and who are able to claim universal credit and are kind of actively engaged in doing so. And we're working with people on the lodging scheme that are at risk of homelessness following eviction from Home Office accommodation. And then I think one final kind of very key difference is in the duration of each project. So hosting, how it works is that there will be an initial 3-month agreement between, Housing Justice, the guest, and the host. But there is, a degree of flexibility with that because someone's circumstances, might be quite out of their control. If you're waiting for a decision on your asylum claim and there's delays with that, often that's completely out of your control. And so we're very mindful of that. And what we will always do is sort of have a review period where we look at someone's situation, communicate that with the host, and then think about whether it's a placement extension, whether it's finding them a new placement. We kind of come to that resolution together, very much with the host involved. But what that means with that flexibility is that we have some hosting placements that are quite short term. We have others that are quite long term, that are often longer than a year. It does vary. Whereas with lodgings, it is a much more sort of fixed term agreement. So it's a fixed 6 months. And the expectation is that by that 6th month, we would have worked with the lodger to help them access a longer term housing option, which would normally be private renting in a shared house. So moving on to the benefits of opening your home to guests or lodgers. We've kind of used guests and lodgers in the same breath there because I think these benefits are applicable to both groups. Absolutely. Firstly, the stability of having a place to live. I mean, it sounds obvious, but the sort of kind of impact of it is monumental. As I said before, almost primarily just in terms of kind of the confidence that it can bring to someone and the security and peace of mind is vitally important in terms of then allowing someone to sort of take the next steps to integrate further into life in the UK. And as that kind of second point sort of explains, these projects are allowing people time and vitally are giving people support to integrate into life in the UK. And it's a really big, that idea of supporting someone in and integration it runs throughout both projects. When we meet with people on the projects, the focus is often on kind of how can we help you? How can we sort of, facilitate you sort of integrating further into life in the UK? And then finally, both projects are very much empowering for the guest or lodger. This isn't the case that we are sort of gifting someone accommodation. Rather, we work with people to help them build experience and to empower them. I think a really good example of that is with the sort of refugee lodgings projects. The idea is that because they're going to be living in a shared house, lodging in a shared house, they're going to be paying rent monthly, they're going to be paying for bills and stuff. They're sort of lodger's building their own experience of what it's like to essentially privately rent, which will then allow them that sort of confidence and knowledge when they do want to move into the private rental market. And so that's, these processes are very much led by the guests or the lodgers. When we sit down with them and establish their goals, that comes from them, and is empowering in that respect. And then the benefits of opening your home for a host or a landlord. I mean, again, this first point I think is just so important to stress, that opening your home, whether as a host or whether as a landlord, it's such a meaningful way to help prevent homelessness, and it's also such a direct way. You can so quickly have such a big impact on someone's sort of situation. So yeah, absolutely. Then for resident landlords, rent helps with the cost of living. There's that real financial incentive. You can earn up to £7,500 per year, tax free. So there's absolutely that kind of real financial benefits with the lodgings project. And then finally, for both projects, it's such a fantastic chance to bring people from different cultures together. It's a lovely opportunity for people from different sort of walks of life to come together, and whether it's sharing food, sharing conversation, sharing laughter, it's a really kind of fantastic opportunity to bring those cultures together, to bring people together, to unite communities. And I think, within a sort of society and within our sort of media that is so often demonizing towards refugees and refugee narratives, and often peddles quite, very negative narratives around them. I think it's so important with these sorts of things to break those narratives and actually bring people together. So I'm going to hand over to Ella now, who will be talking about our onboarding processes.
Great. Thanks so much, Joe. So yeah, as Joe said, I'm just going to do a quick overview of the support that we offer to hosts and resident landlords, kind of from the beginning of the placement through to the end. And Joe touched upon it, but it's just worth noting that the project's been going for almost 10 years. So this has really helped form the model for the lodgings project. So both projects are very similar in terms of the processes that we go through. So for onboarding, to start with, so this tends to take roughly kind of 4 to 6 weeks from the moment that we receive the referral and the application form, kind of to when we receive the application form to when the placement kind of starts. And so this would begin with host or resident landlord submitting an application form. And once we have this and we've looked over it, we would then book a home assessment. So that's for one of us staff members to come and have a look at the property. We'd also require 2 references and carry out DBS checks on all of the adults that would be in the household. We'd follow some induction sessions for host and resident landlords, and also offer a handbook with lots of detailed information kind of about the placement. We'd also ask that an online safeguarding training course is completed. There's also the opportunity to talk to one of our long-term hosts. So an opportunity there to ask any questions from people who have kind of been in the project and had the experience. This is very much a step-by-step process. So it's time to make sure that nothing kind of comes as a surprise to anyone, that we've kind of covered all bases, and a real chance for kind of everyone to get to know each other. Next slide, please, Joe. Thank you. So in terms of matching, so once the onboarding is complete, we then arrange an initial Zoom kind of introductory meeting. And that's just time to kind of initially introduce ourselves and see each other online. After that, we'd allow kind of 24 hours for reflection, and if all parties are willing to go ahead, we would then arrange a home visit to the house, and a housing justice staff member would accompany the guest there. And this again kind of gives them time to see their house, see where they could potentially be staying, and go through a formal agreement to make sure that everyone understands the boundaries and the kind of specifics of the placement. There is then again time to reflect after this visit before confirming if everyone is happy to go ahead with the placement. So it's very much been thought of a kind of friendly and thoughtful process. And it's often been said by various hosts that this process is felt much more in depth than other hosting schemes that are out there. We're aware that there are lots of factors to think about in the kind of matching and induction process in terms of lifestyle and preferences. So we really, focus importance on looking at how suitable the match would be. So hopefully kind of from that, you can see that it's a very much a two-way street throughout. So in terms of support, so there's a strong focus on support for everyone throughout the whole process. We want to make it sure kind of from the beginning that we're here if either side needs anything at all. We organise regular social events for guests and resident landlords and hosts. We would hold supervisions towards the beginning of the placement for hosts and resident landlords. Also regular review meetings of the placement, and we're there for kind of mediation if necessary. There's also a range of training opportunities available. So for both projects, there's also the chance to connect with each other. That's through WhatsApp groups or meetups, and really learn from each other's experience. And it's very much, we really encourage the involvement from hosts and resident landlords, ideas on what support they would like and how they would like that. I should also say that clergy members are very welcome to sign up. So we've actually a number of clergy hosts that we've got in the project. Diocese safeguarding and property teams need to be consulted for this, and compassionate communities can help facilitate this as well. And finally, kind of just to add something that a host had mentioned a while back about the process is, they said there's a real strength in the personal touch. We know all the staff and they know us. And I think that's just important to kind of help highlight that there are these support mechanisms in place and that there is someone there along the way to help. So yeah, that was a very quick overview, but I'm now going to hand over to Aidan, who, as Joe mentioned, is one of our long-term hosts. He's hosted 5 guests, has one living with him at the moment. And he's just going to talk a bit about his hosting experience and some of the benefits and challenges.
Hi, nice to see you all. So my name's Aidan. I live out in Sutton, so right on the edge of London, really. And I've been hosting since 2016. I've done, Ella calculated the other week, over 2,500 nights worth of hosting. So I don't know how much that saved the local authorities and what have you, but well, in fact, they wouldn't even give that money, would they? Because these people aren't entitled to any support at all. I've had 5 guests over that period from 5 different countries in Africa. The longest stayed with me about 3 years, just over 3 years, and the shortest was around and about 6 or 8 months. Why did I do it? Well, it was what Joe said earlier, that really it's all about making a difference in a very small way, but frustration with what was going on at the time in 2016 and the awful picture of the little boy being carried out of the Mediterranean there. And so I thought, well, if I can make a difference to people who are already here, then I'd try and do that. What's it like? Well, it varies as with all of us, we're all different, aren't we? So I've had really great interactions with some of my guests, and with some of them, I have to say it's been really, really limited. And they'll choose to stay in their room and they'll cook absolutely separately. They'll do everything separately, and perfectly civil, but they really don't want to. I think maybe they feel like they don't want to impose on my life, and I respect that, and let them get on their own way. But they're quite different, because some of them. 1 or 2 of them have been very chatty individuals who sit in the front room and we, discuss whatever's going on the news or the sports on the telly or whatever. But others very reserved, really. So I'd say what I've learned out of that is the fact that what you're really doing here is offering somebody a safe place to live, hopefully somewhere they can feel comfortable for a time when they really need it. And there is no expectation, or it's best if there is no expectation that you're going to have some close friendship with them, shall we say. So that's something I've learned just on the sort of personal side of it. I mean, clearly from a political and geographical point of view, a cultural point of view, you learn all sorts of things, and that's been really fascinating in itself. Why did I choose housing justice? Actually, maybe that's an interesting point, because when I was looking to host back in 2016, there was quite a lot of publicity around hosting in the sort of, I suppose, the more liberal parts of the media and the press. And I contacted another organisation, and they were happy for me to start hosting literally the following Tuesday. And they'd not done a DBS on me. They hadn't done any checks at all. And I felt, oh, that seems a bit odd. It's a relatively well-known organisation. Housing Justice, on the other hand, I went through the DBS process. I met with the then hosting coordinator, who's now left, and so there was a sort of check on me, and then there was a matching process to make sure that the person that I was going to end up having stay with me was somebody I'd feel comfortable, and indeed that they would feel comfortable too. So that matching process, each time I've had that as well. So it's not just the first time. Each time I've had that works well, and the sort of rules of engagement, so to speak, of what you can and can't do, are set out clearly beforehand, in a nice way, I'd say. But it is clear. So the building I live in happens to be somewhere where you can't smoke. You're not allowed to. So that sort of thing's clear, and how easy it is for people to come and go. That's all clarified. Whether they can have guests over, because I've got one at the moment who he has a guest over quite regularly. So that sort of thing is clarified up front. I don't know if that's probably I suppose just to say that, of course, with 5 different people, they are completely different, but they also got completely different not motivations, but reasons for being here. So I've had 2 who've been claiming the right to remain under the 20-year private life rule, and I've had 3 who've come across, not exactly on small boats, but come across that type of route to get here. So those circumstances are quite different as well. So 1 or 2 of them have lived in this country for quite some time. So it's not to think that they're all people who are struggling with living in the UK from a cultural and day-to-day point of view. 1 or 2 of my guys have been perfectly fine with getting around and knowing London probably better than me on public transport. But on the other hand, I've had ones where the language is a struggle, and that they can't really navigate the system so easily, and you can help a bit there. So I think in a minute you'll have opportunity to ask questions, but now I'll hand over to Patty again, I think.
Thank you so much, Aidan. I think it just really sort of brings to life, some of your experience, and I'm sure people will have questions for you in a bit. So really now we're just going to open the floor to any questions that you might be bringing with you. So feel free to either sort of put up your hand, and I'll have a look out for people that have questions to invite you to ask them yourself. Or if you'd rather, then do pop a question in the chat and I can read those out for you. Winnie, I think you've got your hand up. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I just wondered, because I'm thinking about my church and taking this to them, but it's quite an older generation church. So I'm just wondering if somebody was interested and the home visit is done and maybe their house is not up to scratch, is there any support that can be provided them?
That's a great question, Winnie.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is, Winnie, is I'll answer it on the lodging side of things, and then perhaps Ella, if you want to jump in and talk about hosting, that'd be great. So with lodgings, what we do have in place is something called a placement support budget. And essentially, Winnie, the purpose of it is for situations like you described, where someone might be very interested in opening up their home, but it might be that the spare room that they have available doesn't have a bed. It might have used to have been a study space, something like that. And the purpose of the placement support budget is that we can provide that financial support with, furnishing a room, making sure that it is suitable for a lodger, these sorts of things. And then other kind of practical measures, like, for example, gas safety certificates, things like carbon monoxide detectors, that also is within the remit of the placement support budget. And so what we're trying to do there is remove any kind of potential barriers that someone who's interested might have if they don't have the kind of perfect space at that moment in time.
Fantastic. Ella, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, just, I mean, kind of, in terms of the hosting, I mean, we don't have like a separate, it's not, that's kind of a difference with the lodging and the hosting. We wouldn't have like kind of a separate kind of big budget, but what we would do is kind of, as mentioned when I was speaking, we'd come and visit the house, we talk to you about the practicalities of it, what we can do to help, what the expectations are, and we'd really help kind of support hosts in that, so they'd feel completely comfortable and happy to have their house and have it being used for guests. We'd kind of make sure that you weren't kind of thrown into anything and you didn't feel comfortable. So yeah, we'd make sure there are ongoing conversations with the potential hosts.
Thank you.
Brilliant. That was new to me as well, so thank you for asking that question, Lily. Were there any other questions? I'll come back to Alistair in just a second. Were there any other questions apart from Alistair? Can't see another hand. So Alistair, did you want to ask your question?
No, just following up from what my colleague Sue has been asking you. I mean, for clarification, I mean, as far as I can see at the moment, I mean, one of the most important things that you as an organization do is to arrange presumably all this kind of preparation work that goes on for both the people who are hosting and the two different, or the hosting and also for the lodging schemes. If our borough is not included at the present time, you say people can volunteer to be hosts, but who would be doing the checking, and would you have the resources to do the checking in our borough and making sure they had the DBS and all the other things that are required? That's my question.
Thank you, Alistair.
Ella, did you want to answer that one, or shall I take it?
You go for it if you want.
Yeah, basically the person doing all that kind of thing that you were just describing, Alistair, in terms of the DBS checks, home visits, all of that onboarding process would be, either myself with the lodgings project, so the relevant kind of coordinator, or on the hosting side of things, we have kind of Ella and also Sally who would do that. And it's very much, I think what's really key to mention is just that it's very supportive. We are very much there throughout the process, kind of very regularly sort of checking in with you, particularly with the kind of onboarding and making sure that kind of the DBS check is completed, any relevant trainings are completed, and supporting you with that if needs be. But that support doesn't end there. It continues all the way through a placement as well. So
you would do this regardless of whichever borough they're in. So I mean,
yes, yeah,
okay, that's
precisely
what I said about.
Yeah. So it's only the like referral pathways for the lodgings project that is limited by borough. In terms of where we can have hosts and where we can have landlords, it's very much pan London.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Were there any final questions? If not, I will pass on to Joe for next steps. I think, yeah, I've got no raised hands left. So Joe, do you want to hand over to you and just talk through sort of next steps?
Amazing. Thank you, Patty. I'll do that now. I'm just going to share my screen again. So in terms of next steps, to find out more information and register interest, the best place to visit is our website. We have a really useful page on how you can go about becoming a host, and some useful information about hosting. and also a similar page for our refugee lodgings as well, where you can register interest in becoming a landlord. With both, when you register interest, we will sort of check in with you and just have a very kind of casual conversation with you, just to kind of talk about, you know, what the process will look like from there on in terms of onboarding, your sort of motivations for becoming a host and a landlord, and then, yeah, sort of begin the onboarding process from there if you're comfortable. Another thing that we can do is we can certainly sort of arrange more kind of bespoke events within your church community, if applicable. You know, myself, I'm more than happy, and so is Ella, to, you know, come to your church, and actually, if you have a kind of group of people that are interested but want to know a bit more information, a bit of a sort of Q&A style thing, we can certainly sort of do that and arrange that how you would like. Then, of course, we're very mindful of the fact that whilst we'd absolutely love you to be able to open your home for either the hosting or the refugee lodgings projects, you know, that's not a reality for everybody. And so if you're wondering, you know, okay, I don't have a spare room, but how can I sort of help these causes, help these projects, then you can donate to our destitution fund. As we mentioned before, that destitution fund is for our guests that have, you know, sort of no recourse to public funds. So it's a really sort of important mechanism, really. And then finally, you know, absolutely any kind of questions that you may have, any comments, we're always, you know, very receptive to hearing them and to answering them. So you can see my email address there. So for any sort of information or questions on lodgings, please feel free to drop me an email. And likewise for hosting, please do email Ella, and her address is there. But Patty will be, as she said, will be sharing this information with you in a sort of follow-up email. So don't worry about kind of having to note any of it down right now.